Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar for today, where we will be discussing publishing in IBRO journals. Our webinar is entitled How to Publish in IBRO Journals, and it is brought to you courtesy of the International Brain Research Organization. And before we go into the discussion for the day, I would like to introduce IBRO and what activities IBRO is associated with. So IBRO stands for the International Brain Research Organization, and we are an organization that believes in equal, inclusive, and diverse access to global neuroscience. We have and we support neuroscientists in all regions of the world, but our activities are administratively divided into 5 regions, which is the US CRC, that covers the US and Canada. We have the LAC, which is the Latin American Regional Committee. We've got the Africa Regional Committee. We've got the Pan-European Regional Committee and the Asia Pacific Regional Committee. In all of these regions, we offer opportunities for all neuroscientists and at all career stages. And these include grants and fellowships and educational opportunities and training. And we also support events like conferences, symposia, workshops, meetings, brain awareness weeks. So please go to our website, www.ibro.org, and look at some of the calls that we have that are open and opportunities that are there for you and your institutions. In addition to these activities, we also believe in fair and inclusive publishing. And I guess this speaks to our discussion for today, which will be on publishing. We have 2 society journals, which is Neuroscience and IBRO Neuroscience Reports. And one important thing that I want you to take away, if you forget everything else that's going to be said in this webinar, but this is important. Proceeds from IBRO's journals support more than 90% of IBRO's initiatives. So before you click submit to your next publication, consider publishing with us, because you will be directly and immensely contributing to IBRO's goals and missions of supporting neuroscience world over. So today, we're going to be discussing how to publish in these IBRO journals, and I have a powerful panel that's going to help us to discuss that topic. I actually have the editors of these 2 journals that are going to be speaking to us, and they're going to take us through the publishing process in these 2 journals. What does each journal offer? How different are they? What are the advantages or benefits of publishing with society journals? And in the end, there's going to be some tips and tricks that you can get to be able to publish your work and to be able to get quality publications. So please stay with us and hold on to your seats. We've got a very great discussion coming up. So I'll start off with introducing our first speaker for today. And our first speaker is Professor Juan Lerma, who is the editor-in-chief of Neuroscience. Juan, as you're sharing your screen, Juan Lerma is the editor-in-chief of Neuroscience, and he's a professor at the Spanish Research Council at the Neuroscience Institute of Alicante in Spain, where he has served as director between 2007 and 2016. He was elected an European Molecular Biology Organization, or EMBO member, in the year 2000, and he belongs to the DANA Alliance and the Academia Europaea. He is the Secretary General of FENS, and he's also the past chair of the Pan-European Regional Committee of IBRO. Juan, if you are ready, you can take it away. Thank you.
I'm ready. Thank you very much, Rachel, for the introduction. I guess you can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending this webinar. I'm going to talk about, in these 10 minutes or so that I will take, about how to publish in neuroscience. So what happened when you push the button of sending your paper once you have collected all the results across a number of years, etc., etc. And as Rachael said, neuroscience belongs to IBRO as well as IBRO Neuroscience Reports. And the chief editor of IBRO Neuroscience Report will tell you what might be the differences between the scope of these two sister journals. So concerning what happens when you submit your paper, I must start since the beginning. Neuroscience was founded in 1976, meaning that is one of the oldest journals in the field of neuroscience. I think it's the second or third oldest journal. And that was the how neuroscience looked like at that time. So, and across the years have been transformed. For instance, this was the cover in 2012, I think, and now in 2023, this has been remodeled to this new, more modern look. But which is important for today's talk is that, as the foundational editorial said, neuroscience is run for scientists by scientists. That means that the people who are going to judge your paper when you submit it experience exactly the same trouble when they want to publish a paper in any other journal. And actually, I have a paper now submitted to a journal. I am just experiencing this kind of anxiety to see what happened with the referees, etc., and what the editors would decide. So as such, this neuroscience is formed by a number of, the editorial board is formed by a number of active neuroscientists spread across the world, from USA to China. But as I insist, they are active scientists that are specialists in the field of the in the field of neuroscience that they are taking or considering the papers, etc., etc. So they are very sympathetic with the submissions they receive, because, as I used to say, our work is accepting papers, not rejecting papers. So neuroscience publishes papers describing results in original results in all the fields of the nervous system. So describing how the brain works, and we don't have any constraints in terms of length, or we don't have any constraint in terms of number of references, etc., etc. And as I said, we have a number of sections from cellular, molecular to theoretical approaches in neuroscience. So that means that we are covering the whole neuroscience range. And it's also important to remember that there is no submission fees. There are no submission fees for publishing in neuroscience. So we are totally free. We don't take a submission cost or publishing cost. There is no editorial rejection on basis of sexiness or how the topic or modern topic or pressure topic could be. And of course, we admit open access articles, although, so this is a hybrid journals, and neuroscience, IBRO Neuroscience Reports is a totally open access journal. So that means that if you want to publish a paper in neuroscience, you don't have to pay a single penny for doing that, except that you want to publish color figures in print version. That there is a cost, but this is totally free if you publish your color figures online. So we published neuroscience is relatively fast. The submissions is less than 4 months, 4 weeks from submission to first decision time. And what is also important is neuroscience is available electronically in more than 7,000 institutions globally. And we have about 50,000 citations per year, meaning that we are in the top 10 journals most cited in the field. So we publish reviews, we publish also special issues, as you can see on the left, two examples of covers of past special issues. We also published perspectives, and obviously this on top of regular research articles. We receive submission from more than 70 countries, so that's is including probably most of the countries doing research. And I said we are just present in most institutions globally. So what happened to a paper when you submit to our journal? And this might be just general for many journals. So once the author submit an article, it takes a couple days before the office send the paper or the submissions to the journal main editors. So the journal main editors mean the chief editor or the associate chief editor screens the paper. And this what happened is that about 50% in our cases, and this takes 2 or 3 days, gets rejected after first screening for several reasons, because the quality is very low, because the scope is not adequate for the journal, etc., etc. Or there is no novelty in the work, etc. The other half is sent to a senior editor of the list that the expert in the field, that the senior editor screens back the paper, and they can send back the paper to the main editor, arguing that this is not going to be or to be successful in the review process. But in most cases, the senior editor submit the paper out for peer review, at least 2 reviewers, and this is what you can see if you check in the online system. This is under review, when the paper is being evaluated by the reviewers. The reviewers communicate with the senior editor, and finally the editor make an assessment to the journal main editor, and is the editor-in-chief or the associate editor-in-chief who take the decision of rejecting the paper. That could be 2 different categories: totally rejected or rejected with submission, something that we call soft rejection. And then with appropriate changes, we can reconsider in a reasonable time. The other the other portion of the papers are accepted without revision, which is extremely unusual. So most papers are accepted, but pending making some revisions. That could be minor, or could be more important, and we call it major. And finally, the other option we can have once the paper gets examined, just after review or before review, is just to advise for submitting the paper or passing the paper from the journal Neuroscience to the IBRO Neuroscience reports, because the scope is different, the vision is different, and that could be better for IBRO Neuroscience report than from Neuroscience. And this is automatically done. You have just to accept this cascading from the Neuroscience to the IBRO Neuroscience report, and this the chief editor of IBRO Neuroscience report will consider the paper right away. So as you see here, the peer review places the reviewer together, obviously, with the author at the heart of the scientific publish. And we can say absolutely that without peer review, there will be no control in science communication. So this is why this is extremely important, the peer review, and nobody has to be just afraid of being peer review, the paper being peer review, because this is going to help you to improve the paper. And this is a list of the purposes of peer review, and the most important one is that peer review improves quality of the published paper. Of course, guarantee citations and the originality, etc., etc. But the most important thing is that after peer review, the paper gets much better. And this is not just a matter of seeing the referee fighting with the author in editor is witnessing this fight. But what I used to say always, if this is your manuscript as submitted, I can tell you that this can be your manuscript after peer review and after revision, very much improved. So to illustrate how useful could be the peer review, I have here an example of an email that I received. This is a pretty old one, but it's very illustrative, and the author say that, or is giving me the thanks for the constructive peer review, and something particularly Reviewer 1 made some very useful suggestion, which has led to me reanalyze all data and has provided with new insights on the nature of the matter of the paper, brain stimulation effect. But the problem or the advantage of this is that he realizes that peer review, although peer review is anonymous, he would have liked to be in communication with the reviewer because to express the gratitude to the reviewer, as her suggestion has helped to resolve an issue with which I've been struggling, as in their words, struggling for over 10 years. So a problem that he was trying to understand for over 10 years, that was clarified by the comments of a peer that was making a very fair assessment. So I don't know, my time I think is gone because, but I would have liked it just to mention that in contrast to very well positioned, honest journals, there are a surge of predatory open access journals in neuroscience that's very, very difficult to control. And my assessment is that you pay attention when you are submitting a paper to a journal, that the journal is a honest one, has a tradition, has a peer review, very well established peer review, etc. So it's a serious journal, because there are hundreds, thousands of predatory journals that just taking a few money from you, publish the paper, but this is just losing your time. So with that, I will leave you. Thank you very much for supporting the Your Society Journal. As Rachael said, this is just helping IBRO to keep all the programs running. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Juan, for that wonderful presentation. For me, as a neuroscientist researcher, I think it's very encouraging for me to hear that you're in the business of accepting rather than rejecting our papers when they get to you, because it can be really intimidating, to get your papers rejected. But thank you for that. And I also think what's really special is the fact that Neuroscience has a sister journal where if you feel it is out of scope, you can transfer it to them and they can consider it from there. I think that's a really special arrangement that we have. We're going to move on to our next speaker. And I see that the audience is already throwing questions. Thank you. Keep them coming. We've got a question and answer session after all the speakers have spoken. So just keep throwing your questions in the chat. We will get to a point where we can attend to them. But for now, we are going to introduce our next speaker, Professor Y.S. Chan, who will be sharing his screen while I'm introducing him. So Professor Y.S. Chan is the editor-in-chief of IBRO Neuroscience Reports, and he is currently the Dexter H. Seaman Family Professor in Medical Science. He is the Associate Dean of Medicine and the Director of the Neuroscience Research Center of Hong Kong University. He is the recipient of the first medallion of the Australasian Neuroscience Society, and he has also served as the president of the Hong Kong Society of Neuroscientists. He served as the chair of IBRO Asia Pacific Regional Committee and as the president of the Federation of Asian Oceania Neuroscience Societies. And lastly, he is stood as a standing executive committee member of the Chinese Neuroscience Society. YS, if you are ready, you can take it away.
Yes. Can you see the screen now?
Not yet from my end. I don't know if others can see it.
Can others see it?
No, I'm getting a no at the moment. Do you want to try resharing again?
Is it all right now?
We still cannot see it. Carolina, can you just confirm for me whether the screen is coming up? It might be on my side.
It's not on my side as well.
Not yet. Okay. Right. we will be attending to that. All right, almost coming up. Right, if you can just go into presenter mode, that would be perfect. Thank you so much, YS.
Is it working now?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the hiccup. I'm YS Chen, currently the editor-in-chief of IBRO Neuroscience Reports. Professor Lerma has just presented the fact that our sister journal, Neuroscience, was published half a century ago, but IBRO Neuroscience Reports was published a few years ago, and at that time it was called IBRO Reports, and 2 years ago it was renamed as IBRO Neuroscience Report, and just a few months ago we acquired the impact factor. Currently the impact factor is 1.5, and the impact factor for IBRO report is 2.6. As Professor Lerma has highlighted, Neuroscience is a hybrid journal, while IBRO Neuroscience Reports is an open access journal. We are indexed in PubMed. We publish a variety of articles, short communications, and perspectives. And particularly, we would like to invite small-scale manuscripts with small-scale results, and also with impact to lead to new insights. Similar to neuroscience, our aim is to offer effective and constructive peer review. IBRO Neuroscience Reports publishes special issues as well as mini-series. And here on the screen, you can find a list of special issues published in the past years. And right now we have 4 volumes of special issues still ongoing, and we welcome submissions to these special issues. And colleagues are also welcome to indicate suggestion to me, to my email address about topics of special issues. Other than special issue, we also launch a cascade of mini-series. And this mini-series is managed by a team of earlier career editorial fellows. We would like to invite earlier career neuroscience to submit their articles to this mini-series. So far, we have 4 volumes of mini-series as highlighted on the screen. And your suggestion about future topics of mini-series is also welcome. I also would like to take the next few minutes to walk with you about some of the benchmarks for quality scientific work. For quality scientific work, the most important is scientific questions. The work has to be novel, and this again is being affected by a number of parameters. For example, by the culture that one acquires during the postdoctoral training or graduate training, and also the status of the author, and more importantly is the impact factor or citation. Colleagues will always ask, what do editors and/or reviewers look for? I have highlighted a couple of points, and I would like to go through this review. Most important is for a particular manuscript to have a clearly stated scientific question and working hypothesis. Next is about citation. In the reference list, reviewers and editors will always like to look for recent publications, whether you are able to quote publications in the last 5 years. And next important item is about reproducibility, and I shall mention this later on towards my presentation. Other important parameter is research ethics and also statistical analysis. Another important element in any manuscript is the abstract. Reviewers always first look at the abstract. I have listed and highlighted 5 important questions. Why the work is important, what you have done, and what the editor can find in your manuscript, and how the editor and/or the reviewer conclude about the nature of the work. For a good abstract, you have to put down a few statements about the background, about the aim, and also pose the hypothesis, as well as highlight the approaches and also the, if possible, the kind of mechanistic approach and also the insight that your work can reveal. Another important aspect is whether the results presented in your work are reproducible. Just for your information, about 10 years ago, NIH in the United States has organized a joint workshop. And the highlight of that workshop is to look at the work, whether the work is rigorous, whether the work is reproducible. And they have published a list of principles and guidelines for reporting the research work. And I have extracted a few points for your reference. The most important question that the reviewers or editors would like to ask is that, is there enough information for others to repeat your work? They would like to learn about the kind of standards that you use, the reagents, etc., the number of replications, the N numbers, animal numbers, so on and so forth, and also whether the experiments were blind, whether it is a randomized study, and also whether you have excluded any data or any animals used in your experiment. And last but not the least is about statistics. So that is my presentation about the journal and also how editors and reviewers would like to assess the submitted manuscript. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, YS, for that presentation. Thank you so much for letting us in on what reviewers look for. As an early career researcher, I feel that that is gold. That information is not information that one comes about or comes across very frequently. I'm sure my fellow early career researchers agree with. So we're going to go on to our next speaker, who is Professor Daniela Schiller. And she's not going to present anything, but we're going to have a little bit of a discussion with her, asking a few questions around the process of publishing, and if she's got any tips and tricks up her sleeves that she can share with us to help us publish our work. But I'll start off by introducing Professor Daniela Schiller. She is the Associate Chief Editor of Neuroscience and has been directing the Laboratory of Effective Neuroscience at Mount Sinai in the US since 2010. Prof. Schiller is a Fulbright Fellow and a Kavli Frontiers of Science Fellow. And she has been the recipient of many awards, including the New York Academy of Sciences Blavatnik Award and a few other awards that I will not mention. But Daniela, I would like to start off by asking you what one should consider before they start writing their manuscript. Can we start there? Before I even start writing my manuscript, what should I be thinking about regarding my publication? I think
You are
maybe
muted.
we can't hear you yet. Still muted. Still, we can't hear you. Want to maybe perhaps re-enter the audio? Maybe, yeah. Aditi, please assist. We can't hear you still, Daniela. Do you want to give it another try? Yeah, maybe perhaps it's the device sound system. Sorry about that. We have a mini technical glitch, but we're busy sorting it out. Daniela, if it doesn't work, you can exit and re-enter again. We do get one of these every now and again with these new technologies. Sorry about that, but Daniela will join us in a bit. Do you want to give it another try now, Daniela? Oh, we've lost her.
Yeah, probably she's going to reconnect.
Juan, would you want to speak to this while we wait for Daniela? What should I be thinking about when I'm starting to write a manuscript? What should happen in my head as a researcher?
Well, I think the first thing you have to think is whether or not you have a story to tell. Whether you have enough results to get a conclusion that is worth making public, just to to convey this message to the colleagues. Otherwise, it's better to wait and to have more data and to make a stronger story. So now it seems that there is a tendency to split the work that one is doing just in several pieces of information, sometimes thinking that this is going to be easier to publish, but this is not true, because it's much easier to publish a strong story, a round story, a word that is leading you to a conclusion, a strong conclusion, and this is going to be much more cited, and for sure is going to be much more impact than splitting this story in several small papers that are not going to tell anybody almost anything. So that's important. When you have a story, just consider whether this story is worth to tell other people about.
Right. Thank you so much, Juan. I think that's very, very important to consider. Do you have a full story that is publishable? Daniela has joined us. Daniela, do you want to now come in?
Yes.
Yes, now we can. Perfect.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I think I caught Juan's last words, but it sounds like what I was about to say, that you have to consider what is the story that you're reporting. Do you have anything very clear that you want to publish? What is the advance? What is the significance of it? Why is it something we should care about? And the second thing is how strong the results are. Do you have sufficient evidence? Is there sufficient data to support the claims, to verify the hypothesis? So you have kind of, before you even start writing, kind of make sure that you have the story set and ready, and even know exactly what are the figures you want to report.
All right. Thank you so much, Daniela.
Rachel,
Yes,
I do have one more point. Yeah, I do have one more point to add. Before colleagues consider writing the manuscript or submitting to any journal, please screen through that particular journal and look for relevant articles that are corporate articles similar to that you are going to prepare, and try to see whether you are pitching at the right level. I think this is very important. And also the figures. When I have conversation with Professor Lerma, we always have exchanges and consider some of the figures can be improved. And so it is very important for you first to screen similar articles in respective journals.
All right. And then benchmark with those at least to pitch your work at the same level. I think that's very, very critical as well. As a follow-up question to that, I'm going to ask a little bit of a difficult question. And this is just in general in publishing. Is it always about novelty in neuroscience and scientific research? What are you seeking as journals and as editors and reviewers? Is it always about bringing something new to the table? Can people improve on something that is already there? Or does that reduce their chances of it being accepted? I know this is a difficult one, but.
Yeah, there are definitely degrees of novelty. So I think it can start from the very basic, which is replication or verification. So this is very valuable. We do seek replications. You want to know that something can be found, some effect can be found again in different conditions, maybe, or even in the same conditions. That is very informative. The other is a variation on that. So you replicate and then extend to a certain degree. This is also important. So these are.
I think we may have lost Daniela for a bit. Daniela, can you hear us? Sorry, you had gone quiet for a bit there. Oh, we seem to have now lost the sound again. Oopsie. Okay, we'll retry again, maybe re-enter again, then we'll give you an opportunity. In the meanwhile, Juan and YS, would you want to talk about this aspect of novelty?
Yeah, I think as Daniela was saying, there are important aspects of that. So replication is very important in science. So actually, a result is not validated until somebody has replicated. So this is maybe is a property which is unique in science, and that's somehow is the beauty. But many journals look for papers or consider papers which are 100% original in that a novel, and other journals as Neuroscience, we consider that the paper has to have a portion which is their own contribution to the field. So there should be some contribution on novelty of the fields. YS can talk about that, but IBRO Neuroscience reports is accepting replications without problem. So that's why the vision of neuroscience and IBRO Neuroscience reports is slightly different. Can you comment on YS?
Thank you, Juan. While our journal accepts replicating work, we also would very much like to present or like to publish work that are novel. In actual fact, looking at the published work that we have put onto the quote unquote market in the past few years, many of the papers contain novel results. So in the scientific field, novel work is of prime importance.
All right, thank you so much, Daniela. I see you are back. Maybe perhaps, sorry, we can, try to address the question again from your perspective.
Okay. So I think we can just think about it as degrees of novelty. The very basic is the replication, which is very important. The next level would be verification. So you kind of replicate and maybe verify it with a bit of a twist, which will be still important. The change can be methodological or just testing it in a different context and so forth. And from that on, you kind of increase all the way to a completely novel effect. And I think the highest degree is finding that change the way we think about certain ideas or systems or concepts. That would be the highest. And in between, it's a wide range. I think all are welcome in scientific publishing. And the key is really to present it as such and address it to the particular journal that accept this level of novelties.
Right, correct. Thank you very much, Daniela, for that. And thank you also, Juan and YS. Juan, I've got a question that I think has come up quite a lot in the chat, and I think maybe it's worth really emphasizing and clarifying. Are there publication costs or submission costs? I think researchers are really worried about this whole thing of paying. Can you clarify for us what the costs involved with publishing in neuroscience and neuroscience reports are?
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Rachel. As I said, I mean, there is no cost, any cost for publication in neuroscience, other than if you want to make the paper open access. Then you have to
Right.
pay APCs. Otherwise, we do not take money for submissions as submission fees or for publication fees or for paper pay charge or whatever. So you can publish a paper in neuroscience without spending a single penny. So it's totally free, in contrast to many other journals. This is not exactly the same as in IBRO Neuroscience Reports, which is an open access journal. And YS, please, you can explain the costs of publishing in IBRO Neuroscience Reports.
Thank you, Guam. The APC, the article publication charge for IBRO Neuroscience Report is $1,500 per article. But of course, under certain circumstances, particularly when the financial condition or funding condition of the author is in a very tight state, they're always invited to negotiate with me to consider whether a full waiver or partial waiver can be implemented for your work.
Right. Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that. I hope that is clear for those that we're asking. My next question now wants to move on to, after I've submitted my my paper. And one of the things, I know, Juan, you already spoke to this, but one of the things that one considers is the turnaround time of when they will get their responses. I know you already spoke to that, but maybe perhaps would you like to re-emphasize how quickly one gets feedback on their paper for the two journals?
Okay, in the case of neuroscience, once we get one of the chief editors get the paper, this is screened. We read the abstract, we see the purpose of the paper, we check the results, and if we think that the paper is not appropriate for the journal, and then we reject the papers on editorial grounds, this could be completed in maybe 3-4 days.
All right.
So once you submit the paper, you can get the paper or news on the paper in 3-4 days if the news are negative. If the paper is worth to be sent to out for peer review, then the peer review takes about 3-4 weeks until completing the 2 or 3 assessment by external peer reviews or reviewers.
Really
But this could be is variable because good reviewers are very busy and sometimes take more time than a load. But in 4 weeks or say 5 weeks, you will have the outcome of the in average, the outcome of the evaluation.
That is really impressive. 4 to 5 weeks is quite reasonable. And I agree with you that reviewers that are really good, that will give real good inputs to the paper in the spirit of improving it from when it was submitted, are busy, and it will take time. So it's important for us to be aware of that. But speaking of this question of rejection, which everybody fears really, what are the rejection rates for neuroscience and also for neuroscience reports, IBRO Neuroscience Report? What are the rejection rates?
Okay, in the case of neuroscience, what we do is a very careful screening at the beginning, because when we think that a paper is not going to go well through the review process, we prefer to send back the paper to the author saying this is not appropriate for this and for that, just to avoid any delay and allow the author to submit the paper somewhere else. So we try to pass the papers that have a chance to be accepted. And then the rejection rate in neuroscience is fluctuating. It depends from year to year. But I think in this current year, in 2023, I think it's about 30% of the papers are accepted. And about half of the papers are not submitted to peer review. So they get a very quick response, and then they can just move toward another journal or to improve the paper or whatever. So rejection rate is about 70% global, 30% acceptance, which is in the range of the very good journals, more or less.
Right. Thank you so much for that. YS?
Yes, thank
Would
you.
you
In
like
our case, the rejection rate is about 40 to 50%. And the turnaround time is very comparable to neuroscience. I can recall the shortest time between receiving a particular manuscript and the acceptance date is about 3 weeks, and sometimes it will take about 6 to 7 weeks. Because we, as a house policy, we would like to have feedbacks from 2 expert reviewers before we can, our editorial board can make a decision. And sometimes it's really difficult to solicit inputs from good reviewers.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Well,
Rachel, I think it's important also to remark that once accepted, a paper is published online in less than 2 weeks. And this is fully citable. So that's also important. So
That's
the
also
print version is going to be delayed a bit more, but once accepted, yes, it's going out quickly online and can be read and can be cited.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Daniela, I would like to come back to you about those tips and tricks to talk about some of the common mistakes that you think researchers make when they're trying to get their work published. Any glaring mistakes that you'd like to point out that we can avoid?
Yeah, one is related to this editorial reject decision. So what we see very often is that papers are submitted just not to the right journal. For example, there are a lot of questions about clinical topics.
Right.
So of course, clinical applications and processes are important, but they have in neuroscience, we look for something that provides insight about neuroscience mechanisms, something that helps us think or learn something new about brain function. If it's purely clinical, like diagnostic or various markers that physicians need, or some methods that are novel for clinic, this would be not relevant. So that's a very common mistake. Another is really the quality of the paper and the figures and the results. This is something you can very quickly observe. So you can see if there are many typos, if the language is kind of just unclear, if the figures are just look bad, kind of they're not compelling in terms of the effects that they're showing, the types of statistical analysis that are used. So this is something kind of we can really glean and immediately see and infer about the quality of the paper. Yeah, so these are just a few examples.
Thank you so much for that. So the question of scope, whether the scope of the work fits into the scope of the journal, is one of the main reasons why papers are rejected. And then number 2, the quality of the paper, even on appearance, before we even get into the actual story that is being told. So you've been warned, or not warned per se, but you've been informed, our audience, of some of the things that you should consider. I don't know if you have anything to add, Juan and YS, regarding the common mistakes that you may want to point to as well.
Well, I would like to mention something, that it is important to provide a rationale in the paper once, or just to submit it. So many papers, we see many papers that they do not justify why they did the experiments and why it was important to study the topic that they studied. So without a rationale, it's important to figure out whether or how these results can be framed into a logic area. So that's important to, when you are writing a paper, to say why. I mean, why has mentioned that. Why should I do what I have done? And why should I publish this piece of information, and how important it is? So it's important to provide a rationale. It's actually science is working in that way. You have to have an hypothesis and then try to demonstrate the thesis. So you have to provide the hypothesis, as a rationale for doing that. And this is important because we observe in many, many papers that there is no rationale. It's just, this is not known, whatever. And there is no rationale, or there is no relationship between the question and the necessity to do that.
Right. Thank you so much for that. So hypothesis-driven research is what we're looking for. Have a strong rationale and a good justification for why you're doing the work you're doing. I've got only 5 minutes, and I think we should ask the question of impact factor. I think Jahid Hassan from China has asked this question. I know so many others have got the same. Should we be considering the impact factor of a journal? What does it mean to us as researchers? Any of you can take this, or all of you, a minute each, if possible.
I'm pleased to do that, because that's a very long, question.
It's a whole webinar on its own.
That's right. Impact factors were created for evaluating journals in terms of subscription for the librarians to subscribe or not to subscribe, not to evaluate the papers or the work that are published in journals. It's just how a journal can be, accepted for the readership. So this should not be. The impact factor of a journal should not be used as a proxy of the quality of the paper, because normally the impact factor is given by a small amount of the paper. So those journals having an extremely high impact factor is because they have a few proportion of the papers being extremely high cited, but many other papers are not cited as much. So we should be very careful by using this impact factor. Of course, journals which are publishing more, I would say, fancy results, or more data that is under debate, more under this, this fancy, I would say, or sexy, could be more. They will have more impact factor. Neuroscience as a society journals cannot have a high impact factor for a single reason. It's because our mission is publishing those results obtained by our members, whatever the sexiness that these results can be or can have. So our mission is helping our people to publish their results, provided they have a minimum of originality, or novelty. That's it. Yes. So we cannot have a high impact factor, because otherwise we just would select those papers having, very strong or very fancy results, and then we will reject many more papers, and we will publish less paper, and probably we will have a higher impact factor. But this is not our aim, definitively.
Thank you so much, Juan. I think that's very important. And I don't think there's anything to add to that. You have really nailed it. I am unfortunately completely out of time now, even though we would have loved to continue discussing. There are still a few other questions that are here, but please visit our website. Please publish with us in Neuroscience and IBRO Neuroscience Report. We care about science, but in addition to that, all of your contributions will actually make meaningful change in the field of neuroscience globally, and that is IBRO's mission. At this point, I would like to thank, first of all, our panelists and presenters. Thank you all so much for making time to share with us and to let us in on I still want to go back to tips and tricks. It's my word, it's my phrase for the day, of publishing, and how important it is for us to consider who we publish with. Thank you, Juan. Thank you, YS, and thank you, Daniela. I would like to thank the IBRO team for organizing this webinar. It has been a pleasure, really, even for myself as a neuroscientist, to just learn about what happens, behind the submit button. I would like to thank also the wonderful audience that we have, all of you that joined us from different parts of the world. Thank you so much. We hope to see you again at the next webinar. Please do join us. And please go to our social media sites, follow us, and follow all the activities that we will be showing there. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful day further.